Nashabor, a world of crimson salt plains, purple lakes, and Draenei sleeping on lily pads. It sounds a bit mad, and it also sounds exactly like what a midnight patch zone could be, and that's because it might actually be one, or who knows, it may be something else. Today, we're going to discuss the latest expansion to World of Warcraft's lore, and I've got to say, as much as we've been a bit suspicious or skeptical about things as times went on, this one actually feels big, pure Warcraft to me. I think it's damn awesome. Today, you're going to learn about the Nethersent, a new group of Draenei from a planet we've never seen, one where they've shunned the light and live peacefully alongside demons. And all that amidst a resurgence of Legion-related forces as seen in the recent novel. You see, in Midnight, in the Voidstorm zone, we find this group of Draenei, and they've been kidnapped by the Dominar, and they've been forced to fight in the Voidscar arena. But here's the twist. These look like Draenei, but we learn that they're not our Draenei. They are not the guys who crashed on Azure Mist Isle. We find out that these are Draenei who left Argus with Velen. But they were then abandoned on the long journey from Argus to Draenor. The Nethersent are the name of this group. They say they were left behind, but there may be an even darker reason as to why they never made it. But regardless of that, we help them get home, and in the process, we confirm that a link exists between where we are and their world. Now, my gut says we're probably going there soon. So, with that in mind, let's dive into this absolutely huge Midnight side quest, one that may even be a patch zone for the Midnight expansion, or perhaps even a patch zone for the Last Titan expansion. We can't be sure, but this is an expansion to the lore that I am absolutely here for. They're one of my favorites because they allow you to actually benefit from the law and your rights. Let me explain, right? Here's the deal. Data brokers exist in the internet, and they harvest your data any way that they can, because they are, I think, unscrupulous. Now, they then sell that data, and that can be sold to anyone, and that can mean you'll get robocalls, you'll get spam, there can be security vulnerabilities, especially social engineering, the more that people find out your data. And whenever a big corporate data leak happens, well, that data often ends up being gobbled up by the brokers. And that is where incogni.com/Bellular Warcraft comes in. It is a superpower. You see, the point is we have a legal right to have our data taken down from a company. You can literally go, write up the email, do all the things and send it. But that's going to take you hours. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to spend my free time doing that. And even if you do that, you can be recollected again. So here's what Incogni does. It scans the brokers, automatically sends the takedown requests, and it adds you to suppression lists. And best of all, it will continually rescan to keep your data down. So here's my dashboard, 114 sent, 8 in progress, 106 completed. I'm on 21 suppression lists, and you can see the spikes in the graph as an example, I added a new home address and email address to it, and just them doing the continual rescanning. It's awesome, and the upshot is really simple. My data is not being spread about the place without my knowledge or consent. I care about that. I don't want that data going all over the place. I'm sure you don't either. Incogni means you can actually benefit from the laws that have been designed to protect us, but that we're just not able to access because they're jumping through hoops and it's all arcane bollocks. So 60% off the annual plan at incogni.com/Bellular Warcraft. I use them personally, and I very much have kept my annual subscription. Let's talk about the Nethersent, and I'll begin with some context. So, I mentioned Dominar earlier on. Now, the Dominar are the nobility of Xal'atath's hierarchy on the world of Voidstorm. They are chaotic schemers who constantly backstab each other. They have one law, that law being might makes right. Consume or be consumed. It's no wonder they're our enemies, and while questing in Voidstorm, we find a Draenei who has been enslaved by the Dominar. They're called Juras the Nethersent, and with them, we begin a quest chain. And in this, Blizzard have done something very clever. You see, there are actually 2 language versions of this. One for all of us schmucks forced to speak Common or Orcish. Turns out Juras picked up some of those languages from ethereal traders, but barely understands what we're saying. But if you're a Draenei, who, of course, is able to speak their native tongue, well, he calls you a brother or sister of Argus, lost to the ages. And that is a little strange. Imagine a Draenei showing up and calling one of our Draenei from Azeroth a long-lost relative. It's quite weird, but it turns out this new Draenei is from an entirely new planet called Nashabor. It's one of the many worlds that Velen and the Draenei visited during their exile from Argus. And that's generally a bit of the lore that we know happened but haven't really seen explored. We basically know they did a bit of a Battlestar Galactica situation, you just swapped the Cylons with the Burning Legion. And it seems some of them got left behind on a place called Nashabor. When we talk to Juras, he explains he was taken from Nashabor along with others and forced into slavery by the Dominar. That's why we meet him here in Voidstorm. Many of his group have sadly died, but some escaped and managed to establish a refuge. It's called Exile's Hollow. It's a small camp where we meet Tulamar, Juras' sister and the leader of the Nethersent. And as we played this content, one thing became clear. Having two language versions of these quests is a genuinely great touch from Blizzard. You see, it puts the Nethersent firmly in the realm of Draenei lore. They're a race that has been conspicuously absent from the whole light versus void A-plot that's driving Midnight. People have thought, hang on a second, we're doing stuff with the Sunwell and the light, but we haven't heard from the Prophet Velen at all? Well, now there's Draenei. That would be a reason for Velen to be involved. But obviously, our understanding of the light has changed over time, and if Velen was to walk right back into it, he'd have to contend with some new thing, some new ideas. And that's where, us having just met some new Draenei, with some lore that flies in the face of everything that Velen once believed, is particularly strong for the story Blizzard are trying to tell. So with that in mind, let's dive into their lore and see just how deep the cosmic rabbit hole goes. Tulamar is titled The Thrice Exiled, and each exile tells a story. The first exile was from Argus, where she escaped with Velen. The second came from Nashabor. You see, Velen's mission did some planet hopping before it ever reached Draenor. Quite a bit, in fact. We essentially know that the Draenei were actually chased by the Legion for thousands of years, and they only found the world of Draenor about 250 years before the modern Warcraft setting begins. Tulamar explains that across their whole journey, they found worlds of snow and ice, of mist and bush, of endless ocean, full sci-fi fantasy stuff that lights up the mind. But they eventually found a planet they thought was perfect. That planet was called Nashabor. Or if you're a little like me, you could call it New Caprica. Seriously, watch Battlestar. Anyway, the Legion found the world of Nashabor, and many on Nashabor could not make it back to the dimensional ships as the Draenei were once again forced into exile. Just so that we're all clear, the Draenei have stopped on Nashabor. They're maybe establishing themselves, trying to get some more resources, all of those things that they would need to do. Then the Legion arrive. The Draenei have got to make a hasty escape, and unfortunately in that escape, they are forced to leave some of their people behind. Those people are these new Draenei who we've just met. Now, the third exile in her title comes from when she is, of course, captured from Nashabor and dragged to Voidstorm with little chance of return and just about zero hope. That is, of course, until we turn up and give them a fighting chance to get home. And the good news is it's not going to be that hard to get them home. At least for us. And that's because we're going back to some Legion-era logic here, where the universe is huge, and there are many ways to connect planets. This time, the connection uses the natural violent energy of Voidstorm itself. Quite literally, the urge of the void to war against itself. Blood sacrifices are made, a lodestone is powered, and in the end, we're able to make a portal to Nashabor. And through that portal, the Nethersent are able to return to their world. That's seemingly the end of the Nethersent story, but along the way, they tell us quite a lot about their world. And honestly, it's insane stuff. It is stuff so big that I think it has to be leading somewhere. I'll begin with the largest cultural reveal, and that is that the Nethersent Draenei don't worship the light. They actually reject all of these big cosmic power things, but specifically, they reject the one that left them in Nashabor, the light. Of course, they also reject the Fel because of the Legion. They know it's quite obviously bad, but their worldview is more complicated than a simple rational atheism thing. You see, Tulamar still calls Velen, quote, our prophet, and Juras does seem to hold belief. So these are weird Draenei. They are very much not the space goats that we've become used to. And here's where it gets weirder. they associate with demons. Now, we don't know how deep the connection goes, but I can tell you what we're told. We're told that the Syad are good at Jedhin. Now, that may mean absolutely nothing to you, but I can actually explain. Jedhin is a form of ritualistic Draenei wrestling, and Syad, well, the Syad are succubi. Yes, these Draenei are wrestling with succubi on Nashabor. We all know that succubi are bad, and if we run into one, we shouldn't do anything, but, you know, you would. Anyway, no more degen shit in the video, I promise. Now let's get back to the lore. What this does is it speaks to some fundamental cultural exchange, right? Two different groups of people engaging in a sport with each other. It also puts a lot of conversation about how evil demons are into perspective. I mean, maybe chaotic doesn't mean evil. Maybe there's a chaotic good in this universe. Sign me up to that one. But either way, something interesting is going on here. We have Draenei who reject the light and demons who reject the Legion. They're seemingly turning some established lore on its head. But there may be an even deeper dimension to the Nethersent. And by deeper dimension, I mean they may have actually killed a Naaru, which, if you know anything about Draenei culture, is kind of a big deal. Okay, this one's a little weird. It comes from a solid source on the MMO Champion forums, which is where a lot of the lore speculation goes on. Now, unfortunately, we could not verify it directly on the beta because of instability BS, but if accurate, it is huge. I can't guarantee you that this voice line stuff will make it into the final build of the game, but here's how it goes. Whenever Lothraxion sees the Nethersent, he apparently calls them heretics, and he implies that they hurt or killed a Naaru. Now this is huge. Hurting a Naaru goes against everything Telmar's prophet, Velen, ever stood for. And that points to a very different origin for the Nethersent than the one they're perhaps telling us. You see, they say there wasn't enough time for everyone to get off planet whenever the Legion arrived and attacked them. But Lothraxion allegedly paints a different picture. Tulmar and her people apparently were not left behind. No, they instead were rebels. Rebels who didn't want to stay on Velen's wacky ride through the cosmos. Now remember, this is Xera's Army of the Light, and, well, you may remember from Legion how her Naaru don't really take no for an answer. So you can imagine the Nethersent believing Nashabor was a planet worth staying on, and simply refusing to leave. That, in those last desperate moments before departure, the Nethersent could have killed a Naaru to ensure their freedom, maybe to stop one of the dimensional ships from functioning. That's basically, though, everything we know about the Nethersent. They're a strange sect of Draenei, and they may or may not be being fully honest with us. But what I want you to focus on here is the sheer amount of detail here, right? And how the details that we've got do paint a picture of a deep culture, a connection to foundational Draenei lore, and put a new perspective on a setting that is currently dominated by the cosmic power rainbow. Because look, if we have demons who aren't necessarily burning Legion people, and Draenei who aren't necessarily light people, that actually means the various species in existence, the various peoples of the Warcraft universe, aren't just defined by what bit of a chart they came from, that they're actually their own people. And to me, that is a vastly more interesting world than one where quite simply the forces of the light must fight the forces of the void, and then the forces of order must fight the forces of chaos. You know, it all feels like narrative Duplo blocks. So to me, sounds pretty awesome. But not just that. If I'm being honest, this sounds like a patch zone. I don't know if it will be in Midnight, perhaps it will be in The Last Titan. But what I can actually do now is describe Nashabor for you. First, the name. Nashabor means the settlement of blades. Kinda cool. It's a world of natural beauty where crimson salt plains give way to cool purple lakes. Its rivers are choked with huge sturdy lily pads. Beautiful, but also dangerous. The young Draenei living there learn to fight earlier than they did on Argus. Martial and arcane skills are essential to surviving on the planet's great intelligent beasts. Yes, intelligent beasts. It is really quite a place. And the Draenei of Nashabor have made unlikely allies in Legion defectors, where together they've rejected the forces that began their exile, the forces of Fel, Void, and Light, and a world where, in the hundreds, if not thousands of years since, they have lived in isolation. Eventually, the Dominar opened void portals and stole many from Nashabor, leading to us finally meeting these thrice-exiled people upon the world of Voidstorm. And honestly, based on what we know of the Warcraft verse, yeah, if we found a good planet that was kind of out of the way, I think I'd rather just shack up and enjoy my life, frankly. It seems that's what these people have done. And with all that in mind, with these amazing, these vivid descriptions, tell me that doesn't sound like a quest designer looking at a coming patch zone and writing exactly what they see. Now, no, there are not data mined maps. There are no hints in the game files. This is just an amazing side quest that's suspicious in its level of detail. And to be honest, one that's just goddamn cool. But also one that gives us a gut reaction that this world is one we'll likely visit at some point in the future. And I think that makes sense when you consider that Midnight has revamped Quel'Thalas whilst leaving Azure Mist untouched. Or, of course, the larger war between the Light and the Void, in which the Draenei seem totally absent, which, given Chris Metzen said this is the ultimate clash of Light and Void, I mean, it would be rather suspicious if it was all just about elves and if the Draenei didn't really have anything to do. So, this could be the seed of their arrival in that war. Now, you may think that's the end of the video, but it's actually not. I've got more Draenei stuff. You may not have noticed this, but the Exodar actually got a new NPC in Dragonflight. Here he is. He's called Star Captain Barabos. He's a pirate, one who's been out in the cosmos the last 20 years doing pirate things. Now, though, he's back, and he can train the Draenei in all the ways of being a rogue. It's a fairly fun lore inclusion that exists essentially to explain some new class options. But here's the thing. Shortly after Barabos' return, two huge lore developments happened. First, a Man'ari Eridar named Azrakal approached Velen and, along with other post-Legion Eridar, actually found redemption. Now, don't worry, it's certainly not all of them. Many Eridar lords are still in the Legion. One actually appears as recently as the Blood Ties novel. But not since Argus have the Eridar been so united. And now we've just went and found another group of Draenei entirely. But it isn't just that. You see, the Draenei heritage chain wasn't as bombastic as some of the others. It was more on the level of the orcish Kosharg gathering. Big vibes of Blizzard respecting the culture and trying to rebuild the Draenei. But within it, Velen did announce one thing. And that thing was the creation of a new city on Azeroth. Not a rebuilding of the Exodar, but an entirely new city built for the Draenei. So we now know that canonically they are united. They are building a new city, and they have decades of lore pointing toward them being integral in a clash between Light and Void. We know Light and Void is the conflict that will dominate the Midnight expansion, and now in this side quest, we found another group of Draenei, one whose lore goes cosmically hard, but in a completely different direction. Expect, then, two things. One, for Velen and the boys to finally step up and do something. And, maybe soon, maybe later, for us to go to the world of Nashabor. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you want another slice of lore that is going to get you right ready for the Midnight expansion, watch this one next.